Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Area Planning and Services Committee on Aging with Lifelong Disabilities Spring Webinar Series, Preparing for the End of Life with Dignity and Support. The Area Planning and Services Committee, if you're not familiar with it, or APSC, is a volunteer group here in Richmond, Virginia that began back in 2003. It is made up of volunteers who are part of organizations that serve people with disabilities or organizations that work with the aging community. We work to provide education and resources for those that work with people with disabilities as they age, which includes disability service providers, family members, or caregivers. We appreciate the support of the VCU Center on Aging and the VCU Department of Gerontology. If you are interested in joining our group, feel free to leave a comment and your contact information in the chat. This is the third and final video in the series. The previous videos are available on our YouTube channel. There was a link in the registration page, and there is a link in the chat if you're interested. In April, we had Remy Belsky, a certified end-of-life doula and advanced care consultant, who spoke on honoring the journey, person-centered approaches to death and dying. And in May, we had Jennifer Moss from Bliley's Funeral Home, who spoke on grief and loss. Today, we're honored to have Eleanor Jones with us. She will help us understand the importance of advanced directives and end-of-life decisions. Eleanor has been the director of Honoring Choices Virginia since 2019. She spent her career in the field of adult learning and training in the United States and overseas. She has a passion for empowering adults to find their voice and use it. In 2020, she was recognized as a top 40 under 40 recipient for her work in advanced care planning during the COVID-19 pandemic. Eleanor is a trained Respecting Choices advanced care planning facilitator and instructor, as well as a Respecting Choices First Steps organizational faculty member training at the national level. She is also a qualified advanced directive facilitator and instructor for the Commonwealth of Virginia, certified under the Virginia Department of Health. In Eleanor's personal life, she enjoys volunteering with local organizations, gardening, and spending time outdoors, spending time with her husband and 2 daughters, and is a proud blood and platelet donor for the American Red Cross. During the presentation, if you have any questions, please put them in the chat and I will make sure that Eleanor knows about it. Eleanor, thank you for being here today. We look forward to your presentation.
Thank you so much, Mike. Can everybody hear me? Just like a thumbs up. Okay, great. I see Ashley. Great. Well, I love hearing about myself. No, just joking. I'm really excited to be here with you all today. Honored to be asked. I do see some names I recognize, so that's great to be in such wonderful company. I'll just emphasize again what Mike said. This is a big topic that we're covering, as I suspect most of you already know. So if there are questions, do please feel free to put them into the chat. Mike knows that he can interrupt me if you feel uncomfortable doing that. But more than anything, as we get started, I would love for you all to put in the chat just any expectations you have. Like if there was something you came here specifically to learn or to get more information on, or to get some clarity around. Or also if it's like, I think I'm just gonna wanna talk to you about this one-on-one about a specific situation, go ahead and put your contact information in the chat too, and I am happy to follow up. I have a lot of slides. We won't get to all of them. That's okay. I'll have them sent out to everybody afterwards. I usually wait to do that because if there are other resources I can share afterwards, then I like to send them all together. I'm going to start us off, and I'll share my slides in just a moment for everybody to view. I'm going to start us off just with some basics around advanced care planning. I know we're a broad audience here, just to get us all oriented. And then we'll dive into a couple of specific areas. We will talk a lot about advanced care planning in general and advanced directives specifically. So again, big topic. We don't have a ton of time together, so do feel free to put in those goals or specific things you're looking for, or again, put in any questions you have. I also want to say, just as I start to share the slides, for those of you that aren't in Virginia, I think we had a few people register. Just know that everything I'm sharing is true of Virginia. So if you work with professionally or even personally with family, friends out of state, just know that the one big piece to know for all of this, especially the legal medical pieces, is that this can change a lot, the law in particular, depending on what state you're in. So while you can create an advanced directive or do advanced care planning in one state and have it honored in another, how that happens changes from state to state. So I just want to sort of put that out there for everybody to know. Okay, now I'm going to share the screen. So this will reorient all of your faces for me. Let me get that up. All right, can everybody see? Just like a thumbs up or a yes? See, great, thank you. Okay, and also just a reminder, my job basically is to do this all the time. So if there is something you want to follow up on, let me know. And I have a QR code for training and further things also at the end. Okay, so without further ado, because we're 5 minutes in, and then I will also have time for questions at the end. But I'm more informal. Oh, and I see people already putting things in chat. Oh, wonderful, nonverbal. Okay. I'll also just share, this is important to me personally, not just professionally. My two youngest sisters are wheelchair users. They're twins. They have cerebral palsy. They have a guardian right now, but I also serve on the board of directors for SOAR 365 in Richmond, Virginia, supporting people with disabilities also. So in topics that are very close to my heart professionally and personally. All right, so let's get started on the slides. Okay, really quick about honoring choices. We are here to support advanced care planning across the Commonwealth of Virginia. We're a 501c3 nonprofit. We are affiliated with the Richmond Academy of Medicine. We're founded initially by the 3 health systems in Richmond, Virginia. We do work statewide, so that would be HCA, VCU, Bon Secours. Love having a wonderful relationship with VCU, many different departments, health system, and university. And really our vision is for every person. That's just every person. There's no caveats or commas after that. In Virginia, to have access to quality advanced care planning that is honored in the delivery of care. So we work both with those folks who are looking to receive the services, but also folks who are providing services and then looking at documents and in clinical settings providing care. So to that end, we work in health systems, community services boards with mental health and advanced care planning. We work in area agencies on aging, faith communities, professional groups, just about anywhere where you might find advanced care planning happen. So again, that's an invitation. If where you are in a faith community, in a professional world, would like any more training or anything like that, contact me anytime. We're going to skip this because we've got a big group, and I suspect that most of you already have some orientation to advanced care planning. So we'll just do some quick review steps here. We're going to review just a basic understanding of advanced care planning because it can look different in different systems. We're going to look at choosing a healthcare agent or a decision maker, and then what it looks like if we don't choose one and the law chooses for us. We'll review exploring personal experiences, definition of living well, and beliefs, a step that is often missed in more formal settings, but is really, really crucial to have. We're going to spend a lot of time on exploring goals of care, especially for the disability community. We're going to look at creating a written plan. A lot of folks think there's one way to do it, when in fact there's innumerable ways to do it. Communicating the plan to others, and then periodic review, which we'll spend the least amount of time on today, probably. And just remember that when we come to this creating a written plan piece, okay, this is the only formal step if we're legally writing, a legally executed document. All these other pieces can happen informally, formally. They can happen in living rooms, in kitchens, out on walks. They can happen in doctor's offices. They can happen anytime. They can happen while you're watching a show. They can happen when you're walking out of the repast after somebody else's funeral and you share some beliefs. So just know that advanced care planning is that larger umbrella, of which a lot of different documents, including advanced directives, fall. And a lot of other topics fall underneath that umbrella. So just, again, a really quick orientation, important for all adults who are 18 plus with capacity. Yes, we'll be talking about capacity. I suspect that's going to be a big topic. I also don't have this, but it's also for emancipated minors. Thinking and talking about future healthcare decisions if you had a sudden event, car accident, illness, mental health emergency, and sometimes not so sudden, right? We're planning for an illness. We have a chronic illness. We have a condition that we know we're thinking about. We have a genetic past that we might be planning for also. So advanced care planning is often put in these terms of sudden event, but it's not always. It's long-term. And then, of course, it's choosing a person close to you to help make decisions with you, for you. So advanced care planning, as we know, addresses all of these areas, right? Existing physical or mental health conditions, past healthcare experiences, the good, the bad, the ugly, personal beliefs. Some of us have religious beliefs that guide our decision-making. Some of us just have cultural background with this work or expectations, quality of life values and how differently that can look for everybody, and how we define quality of life based on where we are in life, how we change through life, diagnosis, all of these things. It's part of our overall health status, right? How somebody who is 18, never had any hospitalizations in the past and has no chronic illness is naturally going to make very different decisions from somebody who is 70 with a new dementia diagnosis who also has kidney disease and diabetes, right? It supports a dynamic system. So a lot of folks also think, well, this is something you just do with your lawyer, or this is just something you do with your doctor. And something that you'll hear me say today a lot is to really challenge that we really want to bring more people into this system and more people become advocates. More people have these conversations, right? Decrease taboo, increase comfort around this topic. And of course, access to care and resources, right? Somebody who is living in a place with 3 health systems and 16 clinics and 5 emergency centers may take a different approach to these conversations than somebody who's 45 minutes away from the nearest emergency department, right? Or their regular physician, or somebody who utilizes telehealth more than others. So we just want to be mindful of person-centered care, person-centered decision-making at the heart of all of this, and really honoring the individual. And of course, advanced care planning and the advanced directive prepare others to make decisions together. And again, it's that dynamic system. So of course, we have medical professionals. We have our healthcare agent, the person we choose, other family members or not, as somebody may choose, friends, spiritual leaders, other care providers. I'm thinking also for those in the mental health space of social workers, case managers, a peer, formal or informal, an AA sponsor, any of those people that provide us with support and care, especially in a time of crisis or planning for decline. So capacity. We're looking at this from the lens of advanced care planning and capacity. We also know that when you ask lawyers, they look at capacity one way. When you ask physicians or other providers, they'll give a slightly different definition of capacity. Even your orientation within a clinical setting, you may be looking at capacity in a different way. But for our intents and purposes, let's orient ourselves in a broader way. So capacity is the ability to make healthcare decisions. So what does that ability consist of, right? The ability is to take in information and make decisions and communicate those decisions. Capacity can be impacted by physical and mental health status. Obviously, something like a persistent vegetative state or anesthesia, right, where you're completely non-responsive in terms of capacity to make decisions, or it could be in a mental health crisis. It can fluctuate in terms of severity, length of periods of loss, right? I'm thinking here of a more obvious one might be dementia, traumatic brain injury, things like this. And it can be present for some healthcare decisions, but not others, right? You might have, an individual might have capacity to say, you know, I really don't want to take that medicine because it makes me vomit, you know, it makes me really nauseated. So I don't want to take that, right? Does that same person have the same capacity to say, yeah, you know, I'm ready to go pull all the plugs, so to speak, right? Maybe yes, maybe no. It depends, right? So capacity can be tricky, as again, I'm sure you all know already. And in Virginia, it requires, with basic founding of the law, 2 providers to affirm that somebody does not have capacity. Now, there are caveats to that, that some of it's just like a 201. We're not going to get into it today, but there are portions of the advanced directive where you could reduce that on your own to 1 provider of a sort. Again, we won't get into that as much today. We'll stick with right now the basic law, which is that capacity can only be removed if there are 2 approved providers. Capacity can be returned by 1 provider. So 2 to affirm somebody does not have capacity, 1 to return it. These are all, of course, related also to civil rights, right? The Department of Behavioral Health and Disability Services Human Rights Office has a lot to say about capacity and when we can remove somebody's capacity and when we can return it. So again, 201 level conversation, but if anybody wants to have it, I'd love to have that with you. And again, you'll hear me say this too. Virginia law presumes adults have capacity to engage in advanced care planning. So again, we do presume capacity. Quick note on mental health. Can a person with serious mental illness engage in advanced care planning and make a valid advanced directive? Absolutely yes, right? Diagnosis alone does not determine somebody's ability to create an advanced directive unless that diagnosis is permanent vegetative state, right? Something where you literally are not awake. But mental health status alone does not prohibit somebody from being involved in advanced care planning and advanced directive completion. So we'll move on really quickly to responsibilities of a healthcare agent now that we've oriented a little bit to like, where are we? What are we talking about with advanced care planning? So just remember, when somebody chooses a healthcare agent, right? And we do get to choose. So a lot of people also just presume, oh, well, if I'm married, it has to be my legal spouse, or oh, if I'm not married, it has to be a sibling, right? That there has to be some sort of blood or legal relationship, which is absolutely not true. So it's more important to think about the qualities of a person and trust in this area, right? I can choose somebody to make medical decisions for me who I might not want to babysit my kids, right? And so when we help people think through who this person should be, especially if the person has a primary caregiver in their life, we don't want to just presume that that is the right person. It's still important to have a conversation. Also, that that caregiver still wants to be that person. We can also choose a backup, right? So we want to make sure that the healthcare agent knows, and that when the person chooses them, they know and can comfortably have conversations around making choices about medical care, reviewing and releasing medical records, arranging for medical care and treatment, making decisions on living situation, deciding which healthcare providers can provide treatment. So a lot of people are like how my parents used to be. And I will share personal stories, and I have permission of all the people I'm talking about. They were married for 50 years and they just said, we know these things. Well, guess what? When the cancer diagnosis came and treatment options came and dad was under anesthesia and decisions had to be made during surgeries, I didn't know, right? They might have also known when they were 30 and had first gotten married, right? But not necessarily, 40 plus years on. So it's really important to ask an individual and to ask the agent, do you both feel comfortable talking about these things? Because these things will come up. Or, okay, you're going to be the primary agent, but who else do I want involved in these conversations? Even if they aren't the primary agent, maybe they're a backup agent, maybe they're just part of the support team, right? So an agent should be willing to obviously accept the role. We want people to know they've been chosen as an agent, because even if somebody names you, you don't have to take on the role. They should be able to talk to you about your goals, values, preferences. Follow your preferences, even if they don't agree with them. Oof, hot topic, right? Make decisions in difficult moments. This is also a hard one, right? But the more we talk about, the less difficult those moments feel because we feel prepared for them, right?
Eleanor, there's a question about, is it true that if you're married, your spouse is automatically your person, even if that may not be what you want?
If you have never named someone else, then yes. I'm going to go over the Virginia hierarchy. I've got a slide on that. That's a fantastic question. So this is why we tell people all the time, listen, even if you don't do anything else in an advanced directive, because it's up to you how much of the document you fill in or don't, it is so important to at least legally execute who you choose to be your agent. And some people are the opposite. They want to say, I'm telling people I don't want an agent because I don't want any of my blood or legal family, and I have no chosen family. I want to do this. Don't call anyone, and that's what I want to document, right? But yes, if you are legally married and you have never named another agent, barring having a guardian already, yes, it would be your spouse. Guardian would kind of trump anything. Great question. I'll go over, in just a moment, I'll go over the hierarchy. So this sort of goes along with that question. If there is no agent, right, there are other laws and regulations that direct who should make decisions about our care, right? There's the Healthcare Decisions Act. Anybody can Google it, Google all the Virginia code around it. Or if you need to find those resources, let me know. We have authorized representative, and we have guardianship, right? Which for many is a last resort. Now, here's the hierarchy I was talking about. So if somebody, let's say I never did an advanced directive, I never heard about it, nobody offered me to do one, so I just never did one. Well, who is it? So again, we've got this green line here, only activated in absence of a formally appointed healthcare agent. One, guardian. So I told you about my sisters. So my mother and one of my sisters are my youngest sister's legally appointed guardians. So that's who would make the decision. Obviously, I'm a part of the valued family team in that case, right? So as a family, we can make these decisions together, but legally, it would just be my mom and one of my sisters, my two youngest sisters. Spouse, except where divorce action has been filed and divorce is not final. Now, here's a tricky one too. In Virginia, we do not have common law marriage. You could live with somebody, you could run a business with them, you can have children with them, you can own property with them. If you are not legally married, they are not your spouse. So you could be with somebody for 20 years, they don't get called. It skips down to the next one. They get kind of cut out, right? Because now other states do have this. Other states have registered domestic partnership, things like this. We don't in Virginia. But I also want to say the opposite is true. If you are separated from somebody, but still legally married to them, guess who could still get a call, right? Now, you could easily take that up with an ethics committee like, hey, these people hate each other's guts. They haven't talked in 20 years. Can we get this changed? And there's a process for that. But just bypass it if you can choose who you want your agent to be. Next is adult children of the patient. I'm saying here patient more than individual because at this point we'd be in a clinical setting. It's not the person who takes you to the most appointments. It's not the child who's the nurse. It's not the child who's your favorite. It's not the oldest. It's adult children together who are reasonably reached. Then it would go to parents of the patient. Again, doesn't matter if your parents are divorced and hate each other's guts, they're both getting called, they're both getting equal say. Then it's adult siblings of the patient. And again, this is all assuming these folks have capacity and are reasonably reached. Just so you know, I have 13 brothers and sisters. So if I got to number 5, well, you know that 2 of them have guardians, so they don't have legal capacity. And one of my sisters is deceased. That still leaves like 9 people though, right? So that would not be good. It's easier for me just to choose someone. And then we have any other relative of the patient in the descending order of blood relationship. That's legally defined. We won't get into it. Or what we call an interested party. Now, an interested party could be, let's say there's a 95-year-old solo ager who really doesn't have any living family friends, but they have a great neighbor who checks in on them, kind of knows what medications they take. That neighbor could become the interested party. They would be given all legal rights except end of life decisions. But again, nobody wants to have to get all the way down to 7 if somebody can just choose and have their agent agree to this role, right? Okay, who can't be an agent? We often talk about who can be and not who can't be. So doctors and other healthcare providers giving you direct service. So your care team cannot be your agent. So you cannot name Dr. Jones, your primary care physician, as your agent. As wonderful as Dr. Jones may be, there's an inherent conflict of interest there, financial, ethical, et cetera. The law sort of says like questionable folks or folks with a conflict of interest. So anybody who steps in, who maybe you've had clear issues with in the past, or again, that legal spouse who you haven't even talked to in 20 years, might not be the best person to step into that role. We can always go to an ombudsperson or the ethics committee if we are questioning someone's the appropriacy of someone as an agent. Okay, so we've already done steps 1 and 2. So steps 3 and 4 is, and 5 is where we'll spend the most amount of time, which I'll get into. Mike, any other questions in the meantime? Not yet. Okay.
No, I don't see any yet.
Okay, great.
I did have one to you. It's that I was curious just because of things here at the Virginia home where I work. Do you go over the difference between power of attorney and guardianship?
In this, I think I have the slide in this one.
Okay.
In my larger trainings, I definitely do. So, but that's a great point. So I'll say thank you for bringing that up.
Okay.
It's really important to check in with folks on terms, right? They might say, well, I'm power of attorney. There's 2 different types. There's financial and there's medical. In Virginia, the same person can hold both roles. In some states, they can't. They have to be different people. In Virginia, they can be the same. But when somebody says, well, I'm already so-and-so's power of attorney, it's really important to ask, tell me more about that. Because a lot of folks know that they might be financial power of attorney, but they might not be medical power of attorney. So when I am saying healthcare agent, it's very important to know that synonyms for that are healthcare power of attorney, healthcare surrogate, healthcare decision maker, agent, of course, I would say is most commonly used. But these are all the same role, but we need to make sure that it's healthcare and that we're not talking about finance, because this process has nothing to do with the finance of it all. So that's a great point, Mike. Thank you. And I think I have a slide distinction, but if I forgot it, I can always send it as a sort of bonus when I send out these slides. Great point. So when we talk to folks, exploring personal experiences, living well, and beliefs is sort of what I call like the appetizer before we get into like the big goals of care conversation. But for some people, this is really the meat and potatoes of what are my values? Do I expect to live as long as possible because I'm trying to reach 60? Or is that not that important to me if I can't take care of myself? You know, if I become too reliant on someone, if I'm in a bed all day versus my wheelchair, right? So this is where personal experience, living well, and beliefs is exceedingly important. And unfortunately, it is the most skipped portion of the conversation. Sometimes it's actually the easiest place to start with because people generally like talking about themselves, or at least they like to tell you what they don't want, right? We might not always know as people what we do want, right? But we can tell you generally what we don't want. Just think about yourself, right? If you had to have this conversation, or maybe you already have, rather than talking about medical treatments or something that may or may not have happened yet, knowing, hey, I hate hospitals. I really don't want to be in one. I'd rather go to a rehab facility if something happened to me. That alone is incredibly important information, right? So we ask questions like, what have you learned from past experiences with your own or others' medical care, right? What gives your life meaning? How do you define a good quality of life? For some people, it's, listen, I don't care where I am as long as I can see nature, or as long as I can read a book, or as long as I can go out and, you know, watch people play checkers in the park. It's different for everybody, right? Regardless of our health status. So then also, what are your personal beliefs and how do they help you make decisions about your medical care? The one I often hear the most is usually religious preference, right? For some people, it's, listen, I need my pastor there to help guide me through this because I don't know. And they are my faith leader and they are my guide. So if I'm going to have a conversation around CPR, I'm going to have it with my pastor and my physician, right? Equally. And that's great. Have the conversation with as many people as you want. Again, we're trying to break down taboo and barrier and improve conversation and comfort. So these are just some of the basic questions we start with. What are your goals, right? And then, of course, what kinds of circumstances would you find unacceptable? When we had this conversation a lot with folks, especially during the COVID-19 pandemic, a lot of folks said, you know, normally I might want to go on a ventilator, but if I get COVID because I've already got my heart disease or I've already got, you know, my COPD, nah, just let me go. I literally had somebody say that to me once. But if it's not COVID, then do something else, right? Yeah, I'm cool with the ventilator if it's just something else. So again, sometimes it's just in this situation, I know this. In all others, maybe I'm not sure. But starting with the fear, starting with the discomfort, for some people is actually the easiest place because that's the motivation, is the fear, right? We have this handout. I can also provide the link to you all because it's available online. But when people don't know where to start, we sometimes just say, okay, on like a scale of 1 to 5, and this is particularly when we get to the end of life portion, right? Because the advanced directive, and I'll show you some examples of it, a lot of the form is about recovery. It's about gaining capacity. It's about gaining health. It's about living with a new norm, right? Only actually one page of the advanced directive is about end of life. And it's actually only in a very specific scenario, imminent death, right? So I like to also explain that to folks that the advanced directive itself is not a death planning document. That's not what it is. Most of it is actually about recovery and finding an improvement and a path forward with your life. It only this one page with 2 questions that are about a very specific imminent death scenario, right? Not chronic health death planning, right? But we do have some documents that can help with that. But the advanced directive is just about this, right? On a scale of 1 to 5, what's more important? Having medical treatments that focus on giving you longer to live, right? Having medical treatments that focus on giving you quality of life for as long as you live, and then defining what that quality of life is, or equally important, or it depends, right? If it's this, then this, if it's this, then this. And then going along with the second question on the advanced directive, which again, I'll show you. One is have all of the possible medical treatments, including machines, to keep me alive for as long as possible. So we're thinking more here about like a permanent vegetative state, coma, versus have a natural death without machines, right? Or, I don't know, never thought about it. So let's start thinking about it, right? And we don't have to use these words. That's also the beauty of this process. We use the words that are meaningful to the folks we are helping, right? So exploring goals of care in the advanced directive can also, and in the advanced care planning, can also look at helping a lot of education. Because we know in this country, folks, regardless of your walk of life, do not have very high medical literacy, right? We don't have high healthcare literacy. We don't have very high healthcare navigation skills. It's very much a sort of learn on the job process as you go, right? And as you try to navigate through systems, physicians, appointments, people, diagnosis, et cetera. So this is also where, if we are looking at long-term planning, especially if we do have a chronic illness, where we can look at what the future might look like, again, just starting the conversation around it, is something like artificial food and water somewhere in my future, or could it be with my diagnosis, right? And having those conversations way at the beginning so that we're normalizing them, because we might change our mind later, but if we don't understand it at the beginning, we only are trying to have the conversation at point of crisis, that's a lot of learning. It's a high, steep learning curve at a moment of crisis, right? So these can also look at breathing, assisted breathing decisions, dialysis, CPR, things like this. So you notice I'm using the word conversation, 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 not decision, 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 right? Often, having these conversations often is very important. So I've put something here. We're going to look at a lot of different disabilities, but specifically with intellectual disabilities, which I know a lot of you come from this background. So people with intellectual disabilities may face higher rates of chronic health conditions and early mortality. Again, please emphasize the word may, because this is a very broad group, folks. May be at risk of receiving care that doesn't reflect their values or needs. I'm thinking specifically if we have caregivers who want to do the best by the person they're caring for, that sometimes their own decisions, desires, needs, values get prioritized over the actual individuals. And we forget to have this conversation sometimes, particularly if it's a parent-child, adult-child relationship, right? Sometimes we just forget to ask the person, what do you want? I know what I want for you, but what do you want for you, right? And tell me why, right? Folks with ID may be excluded from decision making due to assumptions about capacity. oh, well, no, you so and so, they can decide what to have for lunch. They could never talk about that. How do you know? Have you tried? Right? Maybe they couldn't the first time 10 years ago because you were in the ICU and you were trying to have the conversation and that was overwhelming. But over lunch at Maymont on a Saturday afternoon may be a great time to have that conversation again or approach it through a different pathway, right? Folks may also experience communication barriers that require accommodation. So remember, we talked about capacity and the importance of communication, right? But having non-traditional communication that's a barrier we can overcome for a lot of folks, right? So if somebody can't verbalize something, but they can use a computer, they can write, there's so many different technological systems and supports for folks now that conversations may take longer, especially if they're more complicated, but we shouldn't just not have them, right? Just because there might be a communication barrier there. And just remember, advanced care planning is person-centered. It supports dignity, autonomy, and equity in care.
Eleanor, this is one of the places that at least here we see sometimes, especially with our residents with intellectual disabilities along with their physical disabilities, is that often they are still, they do not have a guardian, so they are still responsible for their own decisions. And a lot of people who may have their power of attorney assume that they're making the decision for the individual just because they have an intellectual disability, which is not the case.
Yeah, that's a great point, Mike. Even more reason, right? Because even if the person did name an agent, if they still have capacity, it's still their decision, right? You only bring in advanced care planning and the advanced directive when that person loses capacity. So even more reason to have advanced care planning conversations with the caregivers, right? With the family, the friends, the social workers, the case managers, to say, hey, let's all get on the same page, right? So even though I have capacity and I can make these decisions, I still like to have my dad there to help me, or I still like to have my son there to help me, or my sister or my cousin or whomever, because my caregiver is important to me to include in this. And it's important for the caregiver to know what their role is also and their limitations and where they still need to respect somebody's autonomy. So there is no one size fits all, as you all know, in that process. But I have found in doing this work, the number one barrier is assumptions, right? The caregivers assume, well, I make their lunch, so I should be able to make this decision. Well, no, everybody still has autonomy, right? Especially if they do have their own capacity under the law, right? And medically. But how can I support somebody? How can I provide the right education, right? How can I explain the difference between the outcome of this decision versus this one? And again, it's just a lot of conversation and not having those assumptions. And also for us professionals to explain that to the caregiver sometimes too. Like, what is your actual role in this? And this is why we need to talk about it before there's a crisis, because, you know, Joe Smith here still gets to make their own decisions. They are a legal standing adult under the law and can make their own decisions as such. Does that mean we cut you out as the caregiver? No, let's try to do it together as much as possible, right? We do training. I'll just say this too. It's my shameless plug. In Virginia, you heard in my bio, you can become a qualified advanced directive facilitator, which basically means you're certified under Virginia Department of Health. You get this training to have these conversations, help people navigate these conversations to complete advanced directives, or to know when completing an advanced directive would not be appropriate. So then how do we get those advanced care planning notes into a medical file? Or how do we have those conversations among ourselves, but also with the appropriate providers, the neurologists, the cardiologists, whomever it is. Even my sister's case, the gastroenterologist, right? And also knowing who else do we need to bring in to this? You know, when is it appropriate to now bring in palliative care or a gerontologist, right? Speaking of aging, with disability, right? A lot of us are really afraid to think about bringing in palliative care because we just think, oh, hospice death. And I hope most of you already know this. It's just not the case, right? Palliative care really is about management, right? I just think they're the best healthcare managers in terms of complex diagnoses, pain, symptom management. That's really what palliative care was starting to do, right? It was like that symptom management and looking at your system more holistically versus this is the person who sends you into hospice. That is a role of palliative care, but it's not the only role. And especially with aging, too, a lot of folks are afraid to see a gerontologist. Well, one, they have to be willing to admit they're out with a certain age, which some people aren't. But it's a similar experience. And they think, oh, I don't want to talk to one more doctor, right? But these are folks in gerontology and palliative care who I don't think I've ever experienced someone going, oh, they weren't helpful. In fact, I think that most people say, what a relief. I wish I had known I could have gone to them sooner. Because they're so good at treating the person at the center of the diagnoses, of the prescriptions, of the pain, of the complexity of the system, right? So that's my plug also for anybody who may still be apprehensive or unsure of palliative care or gerontology. All right, I'm going to keep going because I could just go on forever on that, chasing that rabbit. So key considerations for folks with intellectual disability, but I put intellectual disability, but wherever it's appropriate, developmental disability, any other disability. Again, start with the presumption that the person can participate, right? Give that autonomy, give that dignity, right? Use supported decision-making instead of jumping to guardianship or other models of care. And I've got slides on supported decision-making. Adapt communication, plain language, visual aids, social stories, involve trusted people, repetitive conversations over time, right? Explore and honor values, right? Explore those past experiences. I like here, I also put here cultural, spiritual, and sensory preferences, right? Involving that circle of support, of course, balancing legal roles with the person's voice. Even if a person has a guardian, that's not to say they still can't have voice and autonomy in the process, right? They may not be able to complete a actual legal advance directive, but they still have voice in the process, right? And then, of course, documenting and sharing, which we'll get to. And I know we're coming on time. I'm going way too slow. Sorry, there's so much. So I've got these slides here on supported decision-making, which I do hope most of you are familiar with, though it's not as used. It's not as utilized as tool as I wish it were in most healthcare settings. But the supported decision-making is a framework that allows individuals with disabilities, especially those with intellectual developmental, to make their own decisions with help rather than having decisions made for them, right? It's keeping the person, again, at the center of the process. Some key features of supported decision-making, this is sort of what you were talking about, Mike. The individual retains legal decision-making authority, right? They have supporters, many supporters who help them understand, consider, and communicate. And the person with a disability chooses their supporters and the help they want from each of their supporters. And support might look like, again, plain language, visuals, role play. Role play is a huge one, right? Pros and cons lists, communicating with doctors, legal professionals, others, etc. And then, of course, supporting follow-through decisions. Now, I'm going to skip a little bit of this. Don't be alarmed. I always overplan, but you're going to get all the slides. This slide is, and some that follow are basically just explaining specifically around the advanced directive that just because somebody writes something on an advanced directive does not mean it's legally binding. There's 3 types of information on an advanced directive. Instructions, which are legally binding. I generally define those as making decisions about anything that goes into your body or is taken out of, your body. There's also background information. Hey, I'm a vegan. An instruction level, but also background would be I'm allergic to latex, things like this. And then there's preferences. Hey, I prefer to go to hospital A over hospital B, right? We can't make that legally binding because you're going to go where there's a bed or it's an emergency where you can go. But we do want to hear if you have a voice. Hey, I prefer medication C over medication D, right? Whereas an instruction would be I'm allergic to penicillin, don't ever give it to me. So getting into specifically life-prolonging treatments. In regards to the advanced directive, okay, specifically, end of life is a terminal condition, a condition from which the person cannot recover. If the treatment is recovery oriented, this is not end of life, okay? So on the one page of the advanced directive where you're making end of life decisions, it is only a terminal condition from which there is no recovery. All the second opinions have been received, okay? And there are two basic types. Like I showed you on that goals of care scale on the 1 to 5, there's two choices. On the advanced directive, there's two situations, end of life situations. One, death is expected to occur in the very near future or imminent death. And here, even though the law keeps it vague, we're talking like a week, hours to maybe a week tops, right? If somebody's really uncomfortable with that, we can think about 2 weeks. We're not looking at 2 years, right? And then the second is the person is in a persistent vegetative state. And again, we're not talking long here, a month maybe, medically speaking. Just some quick differences between these two. I won't go over every single one, but I'll give you these slides. So the first one, terminal illness would be something like the last stage of cancer, last stage of dementia. They might be able to communicate, but they don't have capacity. There's no treatment options, no recovery. Whereas the permanent coma, permanent vegetative state is, could be something like a traumatic brain injury, but of course, people can live with TBIs for years and decades and decades. So in this case, we're only talking about leading to death. It is not temporary or medically induced, so it's not a short-term coma, because again, that could be based on recovery. There's no or exceedingly minimal brain activity, and there's no active communication. So these are the only two end-of-life scenarios that the advanced directive covers. Anything else we might be talking about end-of-life planning, which is a whole different process. The advanced directive is not for end-of-life planning per se. There are documents for that. I'm going to skip these because I'm going to give you some documents. If you look at the advanced directive, and there's a lot of choices, but again, I'll send you the one that we default to, which is the 10-page inclusive advanced directive that covers mental and medical health care. But there's always the first option, which is basically, I do not want treatments to prolong my life. Second, I want all treatments to prolong my life. And then third, other. I've had people write here before, listen, if my cancer comes back, I don't want any more treatments. But if it's my heart, yeah, I want X, Y, and Z treatments, or somebody on with kidney disease, treat me in any way except for putting me on dialysis. And obviously we work on refining the language, talking to healthcare providers, et cetera. I'm just giving some quick examples. Oops. Those are the ones I said on the previous page anyway. In both, you get kept comfortable, right? You're not going to leave people in pain. So I'm going to skip some of these because I know we don't have much more time. Same thing. The only difference on this second option is this third one here. I want treatments for a period of time in hopes of some improvement of my condition. I suggest X weeks. And for some people, it's not even the amount of weeks. It's I don't want to be taken off of life support until all of my siblings can come visit me and say goodbye. something like this. So you can put in this sort of other condition too. Okay, I'm going to stop here really quick. Any more questions, Mike? Or anybody want to come off of, because I know we're getting at time here and I didn't leave as much time for questions.
Yeah, I don't see any more in the chat right now.
Did anybody want to put one in, or anybody want to come off of mute or raise a hand? All right, I'm either doing a really great job or a really terrible job that you don't have questions. So I'll keep going just for this last little bit, but y'all interrupt me or put it in the chat if you have more questions. So remember, an advance directive is a legal document that has medical information. It's not a medical document. It's not a medical order, right? It's a legal document that has medical information. So it gets treated very differently. For instance, it's not automatically HIPAA protected. This is not a medical document. There's lots of written plans that can fall under advanced care planning that are in addition to advanced directives. So you can get just the healthcare power of attorney, like we were talking about a little while ago. You can get a living will, which is really just that goals of care without naming that agent, right? Especially for folks in mental health recovery, substance use disorder recovery, having a crisis plan is a form of an advanced care planning document, which really complements an advanced directive. We're looking at things like do not resuscitate orders or durable do not resuscitate orders. That's another tricky one that people get confused. Do you have a DNR or a DDNR? And then the physician order for scope of treatment, or sometimes called POLST, physician order for life-sustaining treatment. In different states, it's called different things. Like in Maryland, it's called MOST or MOLST. So this is where you get that longer-term end-of-life planning. And this might be really important for you all's group of folks, where the advanced directive is only that imminent death, whereas POST, which I would say most health systems around Virginia, even if they don't call it POST or POLST, they have these documents where it is specifically designed for people and their healthcare agents to talk about. It's for people, and it's sort of loosely defined. If you are, it would not be surprising if you passed away, if you died within the next 12 to 15 months. Then the POST document might be right for you. That is a little bit more like end-of-life planning. And I wonder if the end-of-life doula might have talked about this too. I'm going to go back also on the YouTube channel to look at the previous recordings. I think end-of-life doulas are fabulous. So, so also know, usually you're going to get a palliative care consult if you're looking at this document. So regardless of ability, disability, when you are looking at, I have a terminal condition, and it is likely I will die within the next 12 months, I want to proactively talk about what I want and don't want, or what I expect or don't expect at the end. And this is a medical order. So do not resuscitate and POST are medical orders. They are medical documents. Again, which the advanced directive can support. So all of these conversations can feed into each other and inform each other. They work together. So we talked about the difference in power of attorney, right? So a healthcare power of attorney is not the same as a general or durable power of attorney, which is financial. DNR versus DDNR, Virginia POST. So just remember, an advanced directive combined, or when we say advanced directive, it's combining that healthcare power of attorney, that healthcare agent document, plus the living will, which is the goals of care, and putting them together to create an advanced directive, which also does have organ donation information on it too. There are many different forms you can choose. A lot of people think it's just one document. No. There's a lot of different forms. Remember, this is a legal document. So even if you choose a form, you can still amend that form. You can attach pages onto the back. You know, there might only be 5 spaces for medications you're on, or hospitalization history. You can attach as many pages as you want to the back and just number them. And a trained facilitator can help you do that also if you're not comfortable. Advanced directives in Virginia are also DIY. You can do it yourself, get it witnessed, signed, legally executed, all by yourself. I highly recommend working alongside your healthcare team. And if you can, finding a trained facilitator to help you, because some of it can be confusing, especially depending on what form you use. 5 Wishes is very popular with older folks. It's very values-based. It's a wonderful form. The only downside is that it's not Virginia specific. It's a national form, but it's still absolutely valid. It's a wonderful form. Very popular one in Virginia is the 4-page Virginia Hospital and Healthcare Association form. It doesn't include any of the mental health options. It doesn't include a lot of the background information in it. So I don't recommend this one for folks who are more medically complex or closer to end of life. The combined one is the sort of first picture I have here. It's technically 10 pages long, but remember, you don't have to do every piece if you don't want to, or you're uncomfortable with that. I know a lot of veterans like to use the Veterans Affairs Advanced Directive. Different religions have their own advanced directives, Jehovah's Witnesses in particular, because of the blood products that they need to specify intention about. And then different sort of disease specific have their own too, like dementia. There are a lot of dementia specific advanced directive forms. There's not really one for cancer in particular, but there are for like kidney disease where they really address more issues that are more prone for somebody with kidney disease to have, especially at end of life. To my knowledge, I can't find any reputable or well-known ones that are more disability focused. If you all know about them, put them in the chat, email me, send them my way, because I would love to find them. Right now, especially in Virginia, I know people typically will use the longer 10-page combined form because it just is the most inclusive of information. But again, remember, you can add amendments however you want. Okay, it's 2:02, so I have to stop, but I'm also willing to stay on if anybody has questions. and remember, you'll get these slides. So the only thing you're missing are differences with DNR, DDNR, and POLST. And then I've got like a document comparison chart if some of you might find that helpful. And then just a basic, like what makes it valid in Virginia. Like in Virginia, it does not need to be notarized like it does in other states. So just some things about sort of following up, some limitations. These are all things you can Google, or we can have a cup of coffee or set up a Zoom account, a Zoom chat to also talk about anybody who wants any more particular follow-up. But I'll send you all the slides. I'll send you all some example advanced directives and some resources. Thank you for attending, and I'll formally stop here. But again, I can take questions from anybody who wants to stay on. Oh, and there's a QR code for trainings that are coming up too. And thank you all for attending. Thanks, Mike.
I say thank you so much, Eleanor. This has been great. It is a lot of information, and we appreciate your sharing it. And we also thank you for sharing the slides later so that we'll have this. And I also know the Honoring Choices website also has a lot of very helpful information.
Yeah, and we're redoing by the end of June, the state advanced directive website will be totally updated also with tons of resources too. So we can get that out to folks when the time's appropriate. But thank you all so much for attending.
Thank you. And remember, this will be posted to our YouTube page sometime soon. And thank you everybody for joining us, both for this one and our previous ones. And if you're interested to learn more about the Area Planning Committee on any Area Planning and Services Committee on Aging with Lifelong Disabilities, please let us know. We are always looking for more people to help out. Thank you all very much. And thanks again, Eleanor.